Hi, welcome back to the Megalamukois. It's Moitzi Shabbos, Parshas Vayera. The end of Parshas Vayera, everybody knows, is the Akedah, one of the Nisyonis of Avraham Avinu. It's the 10th, it's really the pinnacle. And so I wanted to share a thought from a different angle tonight. People talk about the Akedah. There's a lot to say, a lot of lessons to learn, but I feel there's something we missed. So I want to talk about what we missed in the Akedah. A ram stuck in the thicket. What he saw when he was told not to sacrifice his son, it turns out the ram stuck in the thicket was an ancient religious motif. So just to remind you that Avraham Avinu nisnase be'eser nisyonos, Abraham was tested with 10 tribulations, and he withstood all of them, and that's why he's our father, he's our patriarch, he's the greatest. And he taught us how to deal with conflict, and even though he was a pillar of chesed, of loving kindness, but he was willing to do seemingly cruel things, to send his son Yishmael and his concubine slash wife Hagar out of the house because Sarah said so, and Hashem said to listen to her voice, and ultimately to sacrifice his beloved son Isaac. So it's a test from God. And Abraham was unique in these trials that he withstood. But the truth is, we all face trials all the time. And that's really what we're here for, to be tested and to grow and to learn and to withstand temptation and confusion. I want to talk about the human condition and the difficult choices that we have to make all the time and in our everyday lives, and sometimes in momentous decisions. So we're conflicted. We have thoughts and feelings, rational ideas versus feelings, and things that are less rational but speak to our heart, our mind versus heart, objective versus subjective reality, science versus religion. I've said often that I feel comfortable as a scientist, but obviously I believe in religion, so we have to reconcile and deal with conflict. So I want to share here, this is what I found over the summer, something really incredible to me, a ram in a thicket. And this ram in a thicket, it's a little, I don't know if I'd call it an idol or a sculpture, but it was found in a royal cemetery in the city of Ur. And I remind you that Abraham is from the city of Ur Kasdim in ancient Babylonia, but in the cradle of civilization in Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and the Euphrates. It's here on the map. And this is from the year, it says, from 2600 to 2400 before the Common Era. Now, if you calculate, I always like to calculate from King Solomon, who's about 1000 before the Common Era, and he's 400 years after Yetzias Mitzrayim. It comes out Abraham lived around 1800 years before the Common Era. And there's some questions about the chronology, but let's just use that as a simple date. So the years 2600 before the Common Era are a good 500 years before Abraham was born. And there was already this motif. We're looking at a piece of sculpture that's in a museum. One part of it's in London, and there's another one in Philadelphia, so I hope to see that sometime. And it's pretty clear, I have more pictures here, of a ram standing on its hind legs, and it's in a thicket, as it were. Now, it was given that name, the ram in the thicket, by a Christian archaeologist who found it, and so he described it in relating it to the story about Abraham. So since it predates Abraham by 500 years, that was clearly not what it was about. But I want to talk about its meaning and what was it about for the polytheists, the pagans that made it so long ago, 4,500 years ago. This was produced by these ancient Babylonians. And I believe there was a great deal of wisdom in the ancient world, and that they had a significant, important, very meaningful idea they were expressing in this piece of royal art. So let me continue my presentation. Why can't I do that? Okay, here we go. So here's more pictures from different view of this thing, and you see people outside looking at it. So it's pretty small actually. It's less than 50 centimeters. So what happens, of course, at the Akedah, Abraham was commanded to put his son up as a sacrifice. He was ready to shecht him. Hashem told him not to shecht him. And then he raises his eyes, Vayisav Avraham es einav vayar, v'hine ayil, achar nechaz basvach b'karnav. He sees a ram that has been caught by his horns in a thicket, okay? And so that's not exactly this sculpture, but we see the horns of the ram and we see some sort of thicket on both sides of his horns. There's some sort of resolution here of conflict. Abraham was for sure holding in a state of conflict where God had promised him progeny through Isaac, through Sarah and Isaac. And now he's telling him to shecht him when Isaac has not produced any progeny yet. So this is the end. This is a contradiction of God's promise. So how could this be true that God's asking me to sacrifice him? I don't know. This is an example of shnei ksuvim hamakchishin ze ad ze ad sheyavo hakatuv hashlishi v'yachriya beineim. There's one pasuk saying A, and there's another pasuk saying B, and they're in head-on contradiction. What do? I need a third pasuk to reconcile the two contradictory ideas. And that's what this ram represents. Seeing the ram in the thicket is the resolution of conflict. But the ram itself and this sculpture is representative of the conflict, and I will explain now why. The horns of a ram are its power. Like I think of the Dodge trucks are ram tough, and two rams, they butt heads and they use their horns to demonstrate their masculinity and their superiority and their power. So the horns of a ram are a symbol of power and of superiority. And in the human condition, they're clearly our intellect. Of course, we don't have horns, not even Moses. Jews don't have horns, but we do have intellect. All human beings do. We also have our conscience, okay? And we have our feelings, our understanding, our empathy for others. We could use our intellect in a very cruel way. It's a fact that it was called the Wannsee Conference, where the final solution by the Nazis to murder all the Jews, when that was adopted in 1942, more than half the people at the conference were doctors, either MD or PhD. Very smart people, Germans, cultured people. And it wasn't a problem in their intellect, but they obviously had reached a moral perversity unmatched in history. So it's not enough to be smart or rational. You need other things that are curbing you and placing boundaries on your thoughts. And that comes from your heart and your understanding of goodness, your empathy for other human beings. So the human condition is that our horns of strength, of our superior intellect, but also the great gift that God gave us of a moral conscience, which no animal has. Animals don't have a conscience. We have a conscience, but that creates constant tension. We live in a situation of conflict between our subjectivity and our objectivity, between our mind and our heart, between expediency and doing the right thing. And so at every juncture in life, we will make decisions, and it's complicated. Anybody who tells you it's simple, it's obvious. And this plagues us today in our postmodern world, where there's a lot of cancellation of the other side's ideas, whether it's American politics or in Israeli politics. People think it's one-sided, it's obvious. No, it's not obvious. There are two sides to every question. And we exist basvach. A svach, a sibuch, is a complication. So this thicket is representative of the complication and the complicated background that we find ourselves entrapped in it through our horns of intellectuality and empathy. And so we have to find our way and manipulate and wait for the resolution, which will be applying our mind and our heart and finding the right thing to do in every situation. And it won't be obvious. It'll take effort to reach that correct resolution. So that is our test. It was a test of Abraham, and it's a test for all of us, really every day, and certainly in major decisions in our life. think a little deeper and find out what are the two sides of this question, and how can I find the derech hashlishi, the third path, which is the right path, which doesn't negate either side, but finds a way to reconcile opposing ideas. So if we can do that, Bezrat Hashem, it's going to be better for all of us. Thanks for being here. The Megala Mukais. Shavua Tov. Good night.